Welcome to the Political Checkmate, and today I'm going to checkmate David Pakman's video called Study No Advantage to Using Firearms in Self-Defense Situations. So here we go.
Evan DeFilippis was a prior guest on our show. He debated John Lott, who's a big pro-gun advocate, and he recently wrote a very good article about a recent study published in the Journal of Preventive Medicine, which offers new evidence that owning a firearm does not make you safer. The study was led by David Hemingway, who is a PhD of the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, who examined the National Crime Victimization Survey, which is an annual survey of about 90,000 households. And it shows, this won't be a surprise to some in our audience, that so-called defensive gun use rarely protects a person from harm, but also that so-called defensive gun use is much more rare than gun advocates claim.
I might do a checkmate debate analysis of the John Lott versus Evan D. DeLippis debate on a later date. But anyway, the study that David is citing has been responded by criminologist Gary Click. I would recommend you to read the paper, but let's first see what David has to say.
Let's look at this in reverse order. First is that claim about how frequent it is that someone has a defensive use of a gun. Smaller private surveys estimated that there are up to 2.5 million defensive gun uses on an annual basis. But the NCVS data indicates that victims use guns defensively in fewer than 1% of attempted or completed crimes, with an annual total under 70,000. So by using the data from the NCVS, Hemingway's analysis has a bunch of advantages over other data that looks at defensive use of guns. The best surveys fail to produce a reliable estimate for defensive gun use because they capture many false positives, which produce final numbers that are not really connected with reality. And the most famous one-off study on this was done by Gary Kleck and Mark Gertz in 1992, and it suggested that guns were used defensively 2.5 million times a year. It's been written about many times that that is completely bogus and arguably mathematically impossible. So when we actually look at the data, it is very rare that there are actually these defensive gun uses. They may get a lot of traction in conservative media, but they are quite rare.
I have made an entire video defending the numbers of defensive gun uses, but a quick rundown of the argument is that the NCVS data undercounts defensive gun uses through things like not counting no harm cases, and people are afraid of telling the government agency how they did the defensive gun use because they might land in court because of how tricky the legal system is. Also, Gary Kleck has responded to the false positive estimate, and he has also pointed out how his study has also suffers from false negatives, where they could miss defensive gun uses, and many other different estimates were able to find high estimates of defensive gun uses. I would highly recommend you check out my video on the topic, where I cover it in more detail and I provide my sources.
Rare. So then we get to question number two. If you have a gun in one of these very rare situations, does it improve the outcome of the situation? Hemingway's study shows that, contrary to what many gun advocates say, the National Crime Victimization Survey reveals that having a gun provides essentially no statistically significant benefit to the would-be victim during a confrontation. In incidents where a victim used a gun in self-defense, the likelihood of suffering an injury was 10.9%. If the victim had taken no action at all, the risk of injury was essentially identical at 11%. And when you look at the loss of property, we hear from the right all the time, you need guns to defend your property. Having a gun also didn't reduce the likelihood of losing property. 38.5% of those who used a gun in self-defense had property taken from them, compared to 34.9% of victims who used another type of weapon, such as a knife or a baseball bat. So this data, Lewis, it conforms to what many experts have suspected for a while. It definitely does not conform to what the pro-gun right believes, but it is very important.
The Hemingway study suffers from three flaws, according to Gary Kleck. Number one, they arbitrarily reduce the sample size of the data. Number two, they misclassify incidents of injury. Number three, they fail to control the confounders that made the data seem to have a positive association with the injury. Also, if you actually look at the academic literature of self-protection with a gun, it would show you that the guns are very effective in self-defense, and in general, never injured with resistance by a gun. And also, there are studies that show that self-defense with a gun can help you in cases like robberies or sexual assaults.
Data.
It's important we can just throw out the misinformation. We know all about that. I think maybe just having that gun makes people feel comfortable, like putting a cross around your neck or something like that. It's just, it makes you feel comfortable. And maybe nothing will happen to you while you own a gun. And I don't know, people might consider that anecdotal evidence that for some reason it works or helps.
The last thing I will mention is that the risk of injury when brandishing a firearm is much more likely to lead to the victim being injured in the confrontation than if you just run away, if you hide or call the police. So, statistically speaking, you are better off not using a firearm in self defense, but rather calling the police, running away, or hiding. And I know that that doesn't conform.
First off, guns can help reduce the incentive of criminals trying to break into your home, according to the Justice Department. And second, there are going to be cases where you can't simply run away and might need to fight back, such as if you have loved ones in your home, you might want to fight these criminals so you can protect them. And there are also cases where a gun might be the solution, such as if there are multiple criminals in your home, or you can't escape the house, or the police are long away from you, making the gun your best solution to survive. This is the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and please donate to my Patreon so I can make more videos and have your video requests checkmated. And thanks for watching, and have a nice day.